Welcome to I Find a Local, where we share stories and ideas that are deserving of being told. I am your host, Andrew Plimmer. Today I had a conversation with Hugh Butler, an entrepreneur with a scientific background. Hugh is based here on the Sunshine Coast. Hugh shares his story, which I found absolutely fascinating to say the least, and I hope you enjoyed too. Before we continue, may I ask that you like, share and comment and click the little notification bell. This helps us immensely. Thanks in advance. Okay, hi there guys, it's Andrew here from I Find a Local. We're relaunching this channel and my friend Hugh here has agreed to be interviewed. I'm here on the Sunshine Coast at his house, and I've known Hugh for a few years in that we've been a member of a business referral group for a while, and I've always found Hugh to be sort of entrepreneurial and somebody I'd like to learn more about, his backstory for example. So yeah, Hugh, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you came from. I know you're originally from New Zealand.
Yeah, been in New Zealand, but I've been ostracised. So I've been here for 25 years and decided to move here. And I think my first entrepreneurial thing was back in the US when I did a PhD, and we started this stuff in computers, and I invited this bloke called Bill who came down, and this other guy called Steve. And so when I went back to New Zealand in mid 80s, set up an internet. That stage was the largest internet, a wide area network of any place in the southern hemisphere. So we had everyone that wanted computers set up as a mainframe, and then you had dumb terminals. And I said, no, I've been there in the US, and I'd bought serial number 830 of IBM PCs, and I said that's the way to go. So we fired out 150 computers to every single researcher on their desk, and there's lots of people that said, no, we'll never have this portable computers, right?
Right, yeah.
Now we've got them in every single hand, or you've probably got 3 in the drawer as well.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just amazing, isn't it? I mean, we're shooting this video on an iPhone. I mean, who would have thought that you'd get the quality? It wasn't so long ago I was lugging around a big camera and a big tripod, and it's just so convenient. But I was just telling Hugh my story before. I used to fly helicopters, and I called in to see a friend of mine. I was on my way back out west, and I called in to see a friend at Caloundra, which is not too far away. And before I left, he said to me, "Oh, Andrew, you're entrepreneurial. There's an opportunity that you might be interested in." And I said, "Oh, yeah, what's that?" And he said, "Well, it's called the internet." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, I can't really explain what it is, but I've often think about that, and look at where we are now."
Yeah, well, I think in '92 I actually worked in science and science management, and looked at how to take innovative science out into the field. So we reviewed all the 130 programs in New Zealand, and we looked at what they could do in terms of their research and what you needed to do to the innovation and actually get it out. And in '92 we saw some innovation. It was actually routers and so we made routers and software. In fact, the router that you probably buy in the shop today or get from your distributor still has our code in it from the early '90s.
Wow.
And that was we sold it to an English company, and so that's how I got to the Sunshine Coast. I decided to do some sandology, and after 3 months lying on the beach, I decided that was boring as whatever. And so I've been in startups and innovation ever since mid '90s.
So you're sort of you're pre-internet really. When I got involved with the internet, it was the old dial-up modems, which I think was about 1994.
Oh no, we had back when I was doing a PhD. I had friends in HP, and we pulled coax cable through the steam tunnels around Oregon State University, and so at that stage it was really the internet was local area networks, and internet really came out in about the mid 1983, 84. We had gone to Ethernet in 86 when we first rolled stuff out. And
but it wasn't mainstream, like it wasn't in people's homes. It wasn't.
Well,
common,
it was still. It was very much at that stage. In New Zealand, there was the DSIR, which is like the CSIRO here, and the universities, and they had their own networks, private networks, and they were just basically modem to modem, point to point. And what DSIR developed, which was at the same time as Cisco and a whole bunch of other products, internet routers, which allowed you to seamlessly connect across the wide area. And in fact, we spent some time with Telecom and the government, and we put a model together, which was the internet, which was basically a not-for-profit collection of internet. Now, that's moved on into now it's essentially, the internet is still essentially a not-for-profit. So you connect to it, and then people pay own different parts. But it still hasn't really changed since the late 70s when I used stuff in the US, which was internet mainframe computers connected to mainframe. What we did was really, it was the democratization of it. So anyone can literally connect to the internet now.
Yeah, it's certainly much easier now, isn't it?
And really, that as the technology has changed in terms of how you do it. So your modems, whether it's the modem in 1978 or 79 bulletin boards, or whether it's a fibre switch now, that's only just one transport. The rest of the network hasn't actually changed hugely.
Yeah. Obviously got faster though, yeah.
Yes, but it was always the case that in the internet, everything it turned from a product. So you could buy cable TV, which had 100 megabits, or you could buy a phone line, which was 600 board per minute. So an order of 10 to the 4, 10 to the 6 times more, but you still paid $19.95 a month. And the internet service now is you still pay $19.95, or in adjusted terms, for services that you can get. So if you want to have the best accounting system, you pay $19.95 in 1980 terms, so you probably pay $49.95 now.
Yeah.
If you want to stream, use YouTube or Netflix or Zoom or those things, it's $19.95. If you want to use the power of a online corporate accounting system, it's $19.95 a person. So it's a service-based. So we've moved from a product to a service model.
And so what about 5G, 6G? Do you think as I'm hearing that 5G is really not that much faster. It doesn't service the average person that much better.
Well, people don't really understand. It's actually sometimes a difficult concept. I wrote an article for people to try and understand it, because I've looked a couple of times over the last 30 years about whether we actually get into the space. But you actually need an awful lot of money to actually do it. So the technology is back 50 years ago when we first got involved. Really, it's about a stacked layer. So if you imagine a layered cake, right? So at the top is the icing and all the good stuff. It's the media and the communication. But underneath those things are just technology, a way to deliver it. And it could be copper, it could be steel, it could be fibre, it could be wireless, right? So we're talking on Rode microphones, and we're in Bluetooth, and that's got a range of 30 metres, normally about 5 metres, 5 to 10 metres. If you go to Wi-Fi, it might be 100, 200 metres. If we go so there's a range issue. So back 30 years, telecoms used microwave on those big towers to transport communication across. So 5G is just the 5th generation of the wireless technique, and 6th generation is really the 6th. And there's some really smart stuff really smart mathematics in 5G as opposed to 4G. And all you're doing is taking the radiomagnetic spectrum and you're just pushing more data through it.
Right.
So every time they go to a generation, it's about maybe 2 orders of magnitude. So if you pushed things on copper cable of ADSL or dial-up modems, we got about, that sort of speed. Once you went to slightly higher to that, you could get to maybe an order of magnitude, 10 orders of magnitude. So fibre, when I first started, you could get maybe 100 megabits out of it, and now they can get 45 terabits, which is, basically 10,000 times more.
Yeah. Okay, well, moving forward, we're between now and then, what's brought you here to where we are today?
Well, I just love science and technology. I'm still actually in innovation, and I volunteer on a local Suncoast Angels, which is investment into the innovation space. So when we don't do the innovation, I always thought I was a lousy scientist and a lousy innovator. But what I've been good at is actually finding people that have got that innovation and actually then supporting them through business practices and technology and funding to actually help them to grow. So
you mentioned Suncoast Angels before.
Suncoast Angels is a voluntary group. It's part of the 6,500 angel groups around the world. And really, it's when people have good ideas, innovation have got good ideas, they usually start with their own ideas and they use their family, friends and fools to get investment into them. Yeah. And then generally, that's really trying to figure out the technology and their business model. But the next stage is actually getting real customers who actually pay you money. And so that's really the angel seed sort of space. So they might take their idea and an innovator like the Sunshine Coast Innovation Centre or Spark Bureau or one of the other dozens of innovation groups around the country. And then as they move from there, they move into actually having real customers and making them grow. And that's the space that Angel's in. When businesses have raised some money and expanded and have got, say, lots of money, then they go to the venture capital market. But this gap in innovation between innovation and a real business is actually really difficult. They call it a valley of death. So every new innovation, you only get about 3 out of those 100 that actually get from the good idea to a good product, right? To get it from a good product to a product that actually makes money is about the same sort of 10%.
Yeah, right.
So 10% of companies that have a good idea and actually start going actually get through to being, like the Atlassian or the Canva or the Microsofts or those things. They might take 5, 10, 20 years to do it. And there's a lot of people that start businesses and then they just get acquired or they go out of business.
Yeah. I have met a gentleman. He was CEO, I believe, CEO of Kraft Foods in America, and he resigned and retired. And he ended up invited onto this biotech company. Don't take this the wrong way here, but and he went to the first meeting and came away very impressed with the product and the technology. But his friend asked him how did it go, and he said, "Oh, look, I'm very impressed with the product and technology." He said, "But they're broke," and he said, "It's because they're run by a bunch of scientists." So,
but you can go broke even if you're run by a bunch of business people.
Yeah,
and I think the issue is that people only change for one of 3 reasons, right? They make money, or in other words, there's a benefit. They lose money, in other words, there's some reason not to do it, or it's the law. So if you look at things like drink driving, you can have all our rules out there, and even though you can do the good and not kill people by drink driving, but there's still some people, even if it's against the law, they still do it.
Yes.
And so, and the biggest drivers generally is that people lose money. So change is an all stuff. So I like this space in innovation, which is about taking a good idea and getting it to being a good business. And that's really hard, and you need business mentors, and you need support, you need time, and you need money, and you need people.
Yeah. I've always had been involved in startup companies myself, and it is very hard. But on the two times I was really successful, the government actually shut me down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one I was competing with the taxi industry. This was in Cairns, and it was sort of before Uber, but it was prearranged journey for a prearranged amount. And anyway, long story, but yeah, the government actually shut me down.
Yeah. So governments can help or hinder. They can do. I mean, they basically. And you can get shut down by others and all those sort of things. So that's really my last 20 years. I've been in 10 different businesses, and I've had a couple that have really worked, and 8 that about the right average. Right, I've got the scars on my back to show it, and really encourage. I mean, I work with a lot of innovators. I probably see a couple of hundred new companies every year that are going to be the best thing in the industry, and about 5% get funded, and of those 5%, you wind up with 2 that really make a deal, and the 8 don't. Not through lack of good ideas, it's just getting product into, so customers pay money for it, is actually a really difficult part of the process. And yet we're living in a society which is living on that innovation. Right?
Yeah. Just before I move on, just quickly, what's your take on AI? I mean, I don't know whether you've heard about this. I was watching a video the other day about this robot called Aladdin. Have you heard about that? It's owned by BlackRock. Say no more, but And the reason I ask is I was listening to, not so much about Aladdin, but about AI. I was listening to Elon Musk the other day, and he was saying, AI is probably the biggest risk, or potentially the biggest problem for humanity because technology is moving so fast that regulatory bodies can't keep up.
Well, I think over my last 50 years, and people would put me in that sort of change manager and those things, and I do widely read in terms of futurists and those things, because it's really hard to see what's going to be the future. I mean, and time-wise, from a human perspective, it's really difficult. So one of the, and I've written some articles on this, but one of the things about innovation is that what we see a whole range of technologies, and together they make up disruption, and most people don't see it. Most people will see a technology. So if you take something simple, like, well, it's not even simple, like renewable energy. Okay, so 3,000 years ago we used the water wheel to drive energy, right? And about 270 years ago, Stevenson and others actually made a steam turbine, which actually you could convert steam into energy. And so humans have been burning rocks for about the last million years, and we burnt them because we had cooked food and we kept ourselves warm, right? And then we actually used it to do things like Bronze Age and Iron Age and various things to make things. But it was really only Stevenson and the steam engine where we actually burnt stuff and made steam and made boilers that actually got us into locomotion, trains, and making work, cotton mills and all sorts of stuff. Prior to that, it had all been water, right? Water as energy. So for the last essentially million years, we've been burning rocks for energy. And in the last 20 years, what's happened is that we now make technology which actually captures fuel. So if you think about coal, we dig up the coal and we burn it, and like a kilogram of coal is about 2.5 kilowatts of power, which is about enough to run a 2-bar heater for an hour, okay?
Yeah.
Now, we could dig up a kilogram of silicon, and we make about 1/4 kilowatt of panels, about 6 panels. Now we stick it on the roof and it captures the nuclear sun 6 hours a day, 30 years, right? And it decreases over time, but over 30 years. So it's actually about 7,000 times more energy essentially captured, and you've got a capital cost, but you don't have any operating cost.
Yeah.
Okay, it's free. So the fuel cost now, and sitting in the sun, is the same as in 30 years. So that's technology. Now, when you combine technology like PV, solar panels, and wind, which is, again, is technology, we use all our existing technology, and we need to use it in terms of the concrete and the steel and the presidium and the rare earth minerals and all that sort of stuff, and we make a wind tower. Well, the wind turbines are doing exactly the same stuff. They're capturing free energy. So you stick them up, and at 30 years' time, they're still going, 50 years' time, they're still going, and still the cost of fuel is the same. Now what those two innovations do are part of a system, but what you need is something to store that energy when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining or there isn't a demand, right?
And that's the issue, isn't it?
Well, in fact, it's addressed by the same thing as the technology, which is batteries, and you can use, whether it's pumped hydro or whether it's compressed air or whether it's chemistry, because we've had batteries since lead acid batteries for donkey's years, 100th century. All we're wanting is we want to do it cost effective. So what we have is a disruption in the energy field, which is technology and economics and a system, right? And that's what disruption in our society is. So if we take something like electric cars, is a disruption, but it's not actually me owning an electric car or you owning a petrol car. It's actually, we have technology which helps to drive the car, which is autonomous cars. And because what happens is that disruption is from owning your own property to simply renting part of it. You may own it, as you with a taxi owner. You actually may own the car, but you use that car in hundreds of rides, which means you utilise that thing. So as a personal driver in cars, we drive 15,000 Ks a year, and it's 4% utilisation. Now, if you own that car and when you weren't using it, you could actually freely or charge someone else to use it and get it to 40%, where now that disruption is from going from a single ownership to multi-user. Now, what that requires for autonomous is AI. Okay, AI is part of that system. First of all, you need the technology, which is an electric car, from a gas car to electric car, because you can go 1.5 million kilometres without repairing it. You need, so it has to be lower cost operation. You have to have a business model that says I'm prepared to do it, to buy it. You have to have the software which makes it really easy to do that system. For example, Uber or one of the ride share things is so easy. You just go tap, it arrives, get out at the end of the job.
So how far, I've heard Musk talk about this too, so how far away do you think?
It's here today. So if you look at it, and Cruise got public public approval from the PUC 2 weeks ago, which allows them to run, and Cruise will be running their vehicles from 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're doing that because that's when all the accidents happen. And Waymo's doing it in Arizona, and Pony AI has got about 500 cars in China and Shenzhen and Beijing and Shanghai. It's been approved in France, it's been approved in Germany. So it's only a question of time now, it's the decade, somewhere over this decade it will happen. And the disruption is that what happens is that people, if you take a family in Brisbane right now, and there's two people, and they own a new car and an old car, so they're paying about $19,500 a year for transport.
Yeah. Okay,
that's insurance, depreciation, operating cost, gas, petrol at $2, insurance, tyres, whatever else. Now, the models are pretty clear that if they went to a shared transport solution, right, and went from 2.1 cars, which is what people currently own, down to maybe 0.6 or 0.4, they'd save themselves about $15,000 a year.
Which is considerable.
Well, when you think about it, that's post-tax, right? It's actually about a 17% in income. So that's the effect of this. That's why I say people change because it's driven by make money, lose money, or it's the law. So they will change because they want to stop losing money, and they'll use the new technology.
Yeah.
Now they don't have to do it. If you've got a 1956 Ford Camaro, right, you won't change.
Yeah. Because
that's a hobby, and you're prepared to spend that money. But
I think you'll only be allowed to fill those cars up with fuel eventually if it is registered as a hobby type car.
Yeah, and it's not an either or. And the first person to use it will be of autonomous will be the people that are over 70 that don't want to drive at night because their eyesight's too dodgy, right? Or they want to go out to a restaurant and they want to have a couple of wines and they don't want to be caught drink driving, or they don't want to travel, in terms of they don't want to support two cars, right? One car, but you use one car one time. We've got 10.1 million households in the country, and we have 20.2 million cars, right? And on the Sunshine Coast here, we have 4 cars per household.
Oh my God.
Right? We're the highest number of cars per household in the country, right?
Crazy.
So that's why I say, losing money, making money, or it's the law. So it won't be that the law stops us. And there's one other reason why AI in that space, I think has got a huge opportunity, is that we currently lose about 1,400 people a year die on roads, and about 30, it used to be 48,000, but about 46,000 people actually wind up in hospital, severe. And it costs our country $30 billion a year in roadkill. Now, we already know that autonomous cars today, whether it's Cruise or Waymo or Tesla in terms of their numbers, is at least 10 times safer.
Yeah.
So if we only had 140 people die, right, and 2,000 people, that old person who's sitting, or that young person who's waiting for an operation and can't get in because of waiting lists, hospitals are blocked. Because 20% of our nation's health cost is actually in roadkill.
Wow, didn't realise it was that high.
So when people say, oh, well, the regulators won't enable it, what you have to realise is that there's a huge value, not just to the individual, but to the community. And for someone who's been in it, fortunately we haven't had a road accident in our family, so we haven't gone through the loss of losing a family member or multiple family members, or losing the primary income generator, and all those sort of things. So I think those societal benefits of AI. So if we go back to AI, AI is really, we're trying to take what is a really complex brain and try and emulate it.
Yeah, right. I could talk about this all day, but we'll run out of hard drive space. But yeah, very interesting. So just moving forward, I also wanted to talk to you about your current project, your Seaweed. I think,
Yeah.
So you're into health, aren't you? You're sort of...
Well, I always have been in health, and when I turned 60, I wrote a book. I thought, well, I better figure out what the best medical technology is, because I've always thought when you ask a insurance assessor, how long will people live? Well, it actually depends on how well you look after yourself and what the medical technology, which is all the way in the labs and coming out and will be with us over the next 2 decades. So number one, we've got to arrive at that place of being old, still being in good condition.
That's right. That's the whole idea, isn't it?
And then you want to make sure that then you've got enough money, or the system allows you to actually take advantage of that technology to actually live to 120, because there's nothing really biological that says we shouldn't live to about 120. And there's people that want to go push that out to Methuselah or somewhere out there. But I think that's, what do I do? I'll be called an old fart now. What am I going to be called in 20 years' time? We saw a friend of mine in the Philippines 4 years ago. We saw a opportunity for seaweed to grow seaweed to stop cows belching and creating methane. And we said, well, that's really interesting, but how do you actually grow the seaweed in sufficient quantity and at scale to actually do that? So we started, my partner is an Aussie, but long-term in Philippines. So that's what we decided to do. So we started growing seaweed and looking at how we could grow seaweed at scale, and essentially 21st century methodology to what is really a third world conventional. The Egyptians were growing seaweed back 5,000 years ago for health and food, and we know about it in terms of ocean.
It is actually seaweed grown in the salt water, right?
Yes, seaweed is grown in the salt water, and then there's things like spirulina and chlorella and those things that are grown in fresh water.
Yeah. And so where are you at with that project? You've started production, yes?
Yeah, we've been producing for 4 years, and we have a line of seaweed biostimulant, seaweed fertilizer, which is sold in the Philippines. And about 2 years ago, we decided to have a look and take it and say, well, it's good enough for the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans and Vietnamese and eat other seaweed. It's got all these benefits that people have seen. There's about 14,000 species, and about 6 or 8 are used for food consumption. And can I in fact here, because I don't like the taste of seaweed, can I just bung it into a capsule and then take it on a daily amount and see if that actually helps in terms of gut health and feeling better? So that's what we've done. So
and the science behind it does help with gut health, obviously.
Yes, but the seaweed's been used for, as I said, at least 6,000 years, and there's plenty of evidence that, in fact, in terms of changing gut health. In fact, when we crawled out of the sea as fish, coming onto land, basically that's what we ate, right?
Yeah, right.
And so many indigenous cultures. There's certainly even evidence of Aboriginal cultures in Australia that ate seaweed. It's a polysaccharide. It tends to have it's got a slight sulfur bond in it, which is part of the reason why it sort of smells sometimes. And our gut microbes are quite happy to do it, and we've seen it whether it's in animal health. There's trials in animals, there's trials in humans, there's trials in fish. It's really a product that is like a superfood, effectively. So we certainly explored and gone down the path of doing some of the work to understand why it's such a good thing. It's really...
so if somebody wants to learn more, you've got a website, have you?
Yeah, I've got a website.
What's the website address?
BioSea
BioSeaHealth.com.
So BIOSEA Health.
Yep. We'll put a link in the description. Yep. And look, I could talk all day. This has been absolutely fascinating. I've known Hugh for quite a few years, but you never really get to know somebody unless you sit down for any length of time, do you? Really, it's been fascinating. So maybe we might have to do a part 2 or something. Right. But yes. Yeah, thanks so much for the interview. And what's the best way for people to contact you? If they want to
or just on the website or LinkedIn or Facebook, all those sorts of things. Been yeah. So yeah.
So how would somebody find you on Facebook, for example?
If you just search, if you search for me or search for BioSea Health or search for marine algae, we'll come up in all those searches.
We'll put all the links down below anyway. Yeah. But look, thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it, and we'll see you hopefully in another video sometime.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks guys for watching.